Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Moving into the Future. Today, we are joined by Stephen Seligson from Molloy Moving and Storage, an advanced group company. Stephen, thank you for joining us.
How are you? Glad to be here. Me too. I'm glad to have you. You're such a great guy. I've known you now for 3 years since I moved here. I think one of the first people I actually talked to.
I think I moved you, actually, didn't I?
You did move me. That's what it was. Yeah, you had moved me. And we had talked and we had got to know each other, talked a little bit about my experience in residential. So today we're going to have a conversation about residential moving and what we do here at the Advanced Group with Molloy Moving and Storage. It is the season. Right now is when it really picks up. Excited to talk about it. How's it been so far this year?
It's a strange year because of the interest rate environment, although I will tell you that in the last couple of weeks, it's really started to pick up. I talk to realtors all the time, and they tell me that the inventory is the biggest problem, and houses, especially here in Long Island and in New Jersey, are going for over asking. So there are bidding wars, it's just not as many people that want to move.
Right. And see, it was the thought that with the interest rates rising, that would lower the housing costs, but it hasn't at all. So
yeah, and I think, quite honestly, I think the reason why is because places like Florida have gotten so expensive that people from Long Island and New Jersey and New York City can't afford to move to Florida like they were 3 or 4 years ago.
Right.
So that's changed things a lot.
Exactly. And we'll get into that as far as moving into into Florida with our acquisition of Sorensen.
Great.
And we'll talk about that. But with it being the busy season, and from my experience in residential moving, this is when it really gets going. Once May hits, the weather starts getting a little bit nicer. This is when you start to see a lot more movement.
Correct. Yep.
One of the things about residential moving, though, and one of the things we do well at Molloy Moving and part of the Mayflower van line family, is to protect against, some of the things that you see as far as the scams and the misleading promises. That's a big thing in residential moving, because I think what happens often is people always look for the cheapest option. They've already spent a significant amount of money throughout the home buying process, whether it's, the mortgage and the lawyers and whatever else it may be. There's a lot of money being spent, and they think for some reason they can save some money with the move, and there are moving companies out there that prey on that, and they think that, and then
Absolutely. What you're saying is actually just reminds me of a really funny story that I had from one of our shippers that were moving, our customers that were moving, and that is we were doing a walkthrough in this very beautiful apartment, and the guy had a Picasso on the wall, and he said, "This is my pride and joy. This is a $25,000 Picasso. I want to protect it. I want to make sure it's perfect. It's got to be protected." I said, "Great." I said, "Well, we're going to need to build a wooden crate for it to protect it and make sure that nothing happens because it's important and we only will crate it." So he said, "Well, how much does a crate cost?" I said, "Well, it's probably about $250. He looks at me and says, "I'm not paying $250 for a crate." I said, "You just told me that this is your pride and joy, but you don't want to pay $250 for the crate." Needless to say, I said, "I'm not going to do the move unless we can do it the right way, and that's the only way we do things."
Yep. And that's the most important part when you are consulting with a client, is to explain to them why you are paying this amount, why it costs this much.
Correct.
And that was the thing with residential moving. There might be ways to find different areas you could save money in, whether it's packing or, liquidating some furniture, doing a cost analysis of some of the items that you have and understanding, is it really worth moving? But there's people out there who will basically, what goes on now too, is essentially if you go onto a website and you put your information into any moving website, like it could be Mayflower, it could be Molloy, it could be any of the competitors, you put that information in there and then it goes into a database, and then you start getting roasted and just pelted with moving calls.
So I could explain that.
Yeah.
So there are what we call lead aggregators out there that basically advertise on the internet get your moving quote here, get 10 quotes.
Right.
So what they do is they go ahead and they have those forms out there. They pay for advertising for those forms. And then once a consumer hits their name in there, it gets sold to a lot of these second tier moving companies that will just bombard the customer with a lot of pressure and a lot of bad tactics to try to get them to do the move. A lot of brokers as well. So it's real bad, and it's worse now than ever.
Yeah. Can you talk more about that?
Sure. So a consumer goes onto the website, fills out a form. The mover then, or it gets sold, as I mentioned before, and then they get bombarded with these calls. These companies that are buying these leads are often they're often brokers. So I want to I'll touch base, if it's okay, about what a broker is. So a broker in the moving industry is real bad news. All right, what a broker is it's a guy that does not own a truck, does not have any. He does not have any authority, although some of them do get licensed. It's the craziest thing that the federal government will allow it. And we could talk in a little bit about how a consumer can protect themselves. But what would happen is the broker will then give an estimate for the move, all right? And usually it's a phone estimate or a video estimate, more often than not, just a phone estimate. Then they tell the consumer, Mr. and Mrs. Consumer, we're going to require a 10% deposit or a 15% deposit. So the consumer says, great, the numbers look great. I'm gonna pay a deposit. They pay a deposit. It's a non-refundable deposit. The broker takes that money, puts it in his pocket. That's his payday.
Mm-hmm.
So now he says, okay, well, what am I going to do about this? How am I going to, service this move? So he goes to what we call a load board or an independent mover or a guy with a truck that doesn't even have any experience. Those guys show up at the house. Well, there's a couple of things. One is they don't show up because they've gotten a better offer and a better job.
Right.
So now the consumer is all ready to go, but no one shows up. But once again, the broker's got his money.
Yep.
Secondly is they do show up, and then the crew, who's once again inexperienced, non-licensed crew, doesn't even have the right equipment.
Background checks, none of that stuff.
No background checks, no drug tests, no training.
Right.
Maybe no certificate of insurance or COI for the building. So maybe the building doesn't let him in, or he doesn't have enough coverage. But now the guy shows up, and let's just say he is allowed to go in the building. He walks through and he looks and says, "There's way more stuff here.
Right.
You need to give me more money.
Mm-hmm.
You need to give me more money now, or I'm going to walk."
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's scenario one. Scenario two is he shows up, he loads everything in the house, then he takes the items and drives to Florida, Chicago, wherever the consumer's going, and says, all right, well, this was more than I thought.
Yep.
I'm not going to deliver your items until you pay me more. Now the consumer is stuck, and they have no choice but to pay more. Or third scenario is they put it in a warehouse someplace that is unknown to the consumer. And then once again, the consumer is stuck. They have no choice but to pay the money. It is incredibly sad. It's awful.
And it happens far more than you would think.
It happens all the time. I just got a call from someone the other day that they paid a deposit, and actually they filled out a form on our website about getting an estimate for a move. So I called them back, and then they said, yeah, you could tell right away that they were very, very skeptical and everything. And I said, well, listen, I'm happy to give you an estimate, whatever you do. And I tell people all the time, do not give the mover a deposit.
Mm-hmm.
And if anyone could take one thing out of this podcast,
Yep.
Do not give the mover a deposit. Never. So, first she had her guard up and was very concerned. And she said, yeah, I just lost $1,600. And I said, I of course gave her some advice on how to try to get that money back. And there are things that a consumer can do. And then we talked about what we can do for her. Of course, our price is going to be more because, once again, we're not a broker or a high quality mover. We have valuation in our moves and everything else. So anyway, long story short, she was screwed by this guy. We are working with her now to help her with getting her move done. And she unfortunately learned the hard way. Sometimes the credit card companies will not even give the money back.
Yep, with the fraud and stuff like that.
Fraud.
Yeah. And that's the thing too. The moving process in itself is very stressful.
Correct.
You're uplifting your life, and whether you're moving down the street or to another state, it's a lot. And it's a cumbersome activity and process to go through.
Correct.
So when you put your trust into somebody who you think is going to take care of you and make sure ease that stress in some sense, and then they make more stress, it only causes more anxiety and really just a terrible, terrible experience. I feel so horrible when I hear it happen to people. And you know, I'm lucky that I've never had to been a part of something like that. But I remember when I first got into residential moving 10 years ago, that was the big thing, is you should never be paying a deposit to a mover before they step on site. And that's another thing that people should identify when they're going through the quoting process and you know, putting together different bids for their move, is look at the quality of people who are going through that estimating process with you.
Correct.
What type of questions are they asking? What type of advice are they giving? As far as providing a timeline, you know, up front, and how is this going to look for you? That should be taken into consideration, because if somebody's just, you know, putting in some information online, and then even if they're just getting an email back or a quick phone call back and maybe some qualifying questions and then putting a quote out there, that's not the type of experience you would want. You know, let's say you're going to, you know, a doctor or something like that. You don't want a doctor who's gonna give you his opinion over the phone. You want somebody.
You don't want to go to a board certified doctor.
Right.
You're not going to go to, and you're not going to just go to some guy you find on the internet. You're going to ask friends and relatives and for referrals and other things. Let me tell you about some of the things that a consumer can do to protect themselves. One thing is, there's a government website. It's called protectyourmove.gov. Okay, very good website. You can search for your mover to see if that mover is a vetted mover by the government.
Wow.
Okay, it's a very good site. It also has a lot of tips, and if you get scammed. That's one thing. The next thing is your local moving authority. Now, I happen to be on the board of LIMSA, which is the Long Island Moving and Storage Association. Any mover that is on Long Island, that is a reputable mover, is going to be on that organization. We will not let a mover in that's not reputable, that's not licensed, it's not insured, and everything else. So LIMS is another place. It's limsa.org. In New Jersey, there's a website which I'm also a member of, which is called New Jersey Movers, njmovers.com. Also, in New Jersey, you could check out your mover there too. The other things, there's a couple of things which I always tell consumers. If you want to see if the moving company is real, Google their corporate address. I can't tell you how many times, if you Google their address, you will see a house in the middle of a shady area. And there's no trucks in the lot, there's no parking lot, it's just a house. Well, if that's not a red flag, I don't know what is. Another thing is, look, if the mover is located in Montana and they're booking your move in New York, well, that's another thing. Also, by the way, on the Protect Your Move, you can see how many trucks the moving company has.
Wow, yeah. Wow.
Yeah, so you can know if they're real. By knowing how many trucks. If they have one truck and they're going to be picking you up from from New York to go to Florida, there's something wrong with that. So very important. The other thing that you can do is, we talked about Google reviews, right? Look at Google reviews, very important. You could see, you know, no one's going to get all 5 stars. If they have all 5 stars, that's actually a red flag.
Yeah, it is. Especially in moving.
Especially in moving. Don't forget, people complain when they're people write a review most often when they're unhappy versus when they're happy. So, you know, you want to go for a mover that's got, you know, 4 stars is a great number. 3.5 if the reviews look legitimate.
Yeah, even in the last, like, you know, year, if those reviews have increased or have become more stable to the 4 or 5 star range, that's something I look for. Again, we've been in business for, you know, over 50 years. How long have you been doing residential moving?
I've been here for about 8 years.
Okay.
8 years. So, and when I started, I knew nothing about the industry. And the guy who was running the show at the time basically said, here's my desk, I'm going to play golf for 2 weeks, figure it out. And so a lot of it was self-taught and experience. And I've got a lot of experience in it, Jack.
Me too. It was the same with me. That self-taught and residential moving is not easy.
It's baptism by fire.
It really is. You gotta learn by failing a lot. So I've been there. But you mentioned on protectyourmove.gov, they count how many trucks you have there. And the Advance Group family of companies, just acquired a significant amount of trucks through Sorensen in Florida, which we talked about last time with KJ. What's that mean to you? I mean, from a residential moving standpoint,
Well, it is
jackpot.
honestly, it is the most exciting thing that's happened in my career since I've been in the moving industry. We have always had an incredibly good name in the New York, New Jersey area for Molloy Moving. It's been great. What this does for us is we used to have about 8 or 9 over the road drivers, which is the long haul drivers.
Right.
We now have about I think the number is about 24 or so over the road drivers. What this really means is we are servicing not over 100% of our shipments, which means we have complete control of everything. We know the drivers, we know that they're trained, we know who the labor is, we know who the crews are. We can call them up and say, hey, when is this going to be there? We can go out of our way for customers better than ever before.
And how unusual is that in residential moving?
Well, there's a nationwide driver shortage. So now it is very unusual to be as powerful now as we are, because there's just not as many truckers on the road.
Mm-hmm.
So we rely on the system, which is a good system to service the work. Now we have way more control over it, and we really can do a great job for our clients.
So from a quality service standpoint, there's not many other companies out there who can do it like Molloy, and that's not even like a marketing pitch. That's just a fact.
Yeah, that is just a fact. And that's Molloy Mayflower, because once again, when we're going across state lines,
Right.
it's under the Mayflower name.
Mayflower.
Right.
Can you tell me the difference between Molloy and Mayflower?
Sure.
Is there a difference?
Yes, there is, and this is a question I get asked all the time, because when we say, we answer the phone, Molloy Moving Mayflower, and people say, well, I thought you're Mayflower.
Mm-hmm.
And I explain to people, Mayflower does not own a moving truck on their own.
Right.
So Mayflower is a cooperative, and by the way, it's part of the United Mayflower Group. The parent company is called Unigroup. Mayflower does not own a truck on their own. They have about 600 agents throughout the country that all, like us, own the trucks. Now, what happens is, if I'm going to, let's say, New Mexico, and I don't have one of my drivers going to New Mexico, I can rely on my system, because the New Mexico agent may have a crew up in New York.
Yep.
Okay. So, that's what's called a van line, and we are the largest van line in the country.
Mayflower is.
Mayflower, United,
Right.
combined.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So, in terms of a consumer, you want to go with the big dogs. It's bottom line. It's important that they understand that.
Yeah, and especially if it's a family, and it's like a 4 or 5 plus bedroom house, and you have a lot of assets. There's no way to do that move cheap. If you're moving your family, and even if you're not, if you're in the stage of your life where you own, I think that's a good threshold.
You know what? I'm gonna correct you on that one.
Okay.
We have programs for small 1-bedroom apartment moves
Didn't know that.
are better than any system, any mover in the country. Whereas I can move a 1-bedroom, 1,000 square foot apartment or less from here to the most remote area of the country, where nobody else can do that. We have systems in place to do that. We have a program called Snapmoves, which it's a containerized program. To the consumer, it's somewhat transparent, but basically the difference is we containerize the shipments in their own container. We may ship it rail, we may ship it common carrier to another agent in our system in that destination location, and then it gets brought to their home in that container. So large moves, small moves, we have the answer for everything.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Snapmoves.
Snapmoves.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
Yeah. And so you can do, each snap move you get $10,000 of valuation coverage, which is great, and 0 deductible, 100% replacement value.
Really?
Jack, when I tell you one of the differences, nobody has valuation like that. And we were talking about scams before. Let's talk about this one. So consumer goes and looks at a moving company, and they, usually consumers say, am I covered with insurance? First of all, no mover has insurance.
That's right.
It's called valuation.
You learn that early too when you're in the residential days.
We're not allowed to say insurance. We're not an insurance company.
Mm-hmm.
So with valuation coverage, the government requires everyone that has every licensed mover carries what we call 60 cents per pound per article.
Basic.
When I say basic, it's less than basic.
Right.
If you think about your sofa that weighs that weighs, I don't know, what is it?
300 pounds.
300 pounds, 300 times 60. It's nothing.
It's pennies on a dollar.
Pennies on the
Literally.
But to the consumer, the moving company can say, "Oh yeah, you're covered. You're fully covered."
Right.
They don't read the fine print that says 60 cents a pound. Very important. So Mayflower only has zero deductible, 100% replacement value, which means, and not that I'm encouraging this, but if you have that pen that's on your table that's broken, you could file a claim for that pen and you're covered.
I wouldn't encourage that either.
I would not encourage that.
But let's think of something, more sentimental or valuable. If they have a desk, that gets dinged in a move.
Yep.
That's
fully covered
and included in the move price up front.
Correct.
Very important to know.
Very important. We also have another program, if you'll just indulge me for a second.
Please go. I'm learning today.
There you go. We have this program that is so unique in the industry that nobody else has it. It's called our value-added package. And once again, this is not trying to be a sales pitch. I moved my
You gotta
parents.
let the people know.
Right, I do. I moved my parents to Florida. I would not do a move without this package.
And it's called value.
It's called the Mayflower On Point Value-Added Package.
Okay.
It's $199 added to the cost of the move. Okay, it covers three major important things. It covers mechanical breakdown. Okay, what is mechanical breakdown? Well, I tell people anything with a plug is considered mechanical breakdown. Your TV, your microwave, your toaster oven.
Oh, wow.
If you were to get to your home, right, and the box is not damaged on that TV, there's no physical damage, you go to plug in that TV and you have a sound and no picture, all right? And so you say, great, I'm covered. I go to file a claim. Awesome. Well, your claim will be denied because it's called inherent vice.
Mm-hmm.
The movers didn't know that it wasn't working before. No one could prove it. They're going to deny it. Okay, with this $199 package, no matter what, no questions asked. If anything with a plug is damaged, any mechanical breakdown, it's covered.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what.
It's huge.
Huge. For the same $199, the second really great thing it has what we call pairs and sets. Okay, if we have a sofa and love seat that's matching, and for some reason something happens, and we tell all customers, don't bring any liquids in the truck.
Yep.
Let's just say they break the rules and
Cleaning supplies, they hide them in
cleaning supplies.
Yep.
And they break the rules, and there's a bottle of bleach that gets over the couch.
Yep.
The couch is destroyed.
Yep.
Well, you would get coverage on the couch, but now the couch and the love seat don't match, right? With our value-added package, pairs and sets, you'd get a brand new set. Couch, love seat, sofa, whatever it is, all matching. So that is completely covered. It's not just the sofa. Now it's everything.
Wow.
It's huge, huge. When no one else does this.
Oh.
The other thing that it covers is acts of God, right?
Yeah.
And once again, difference between insurance and valuation, okay? If we're moving someone in the middle of the winter, and there's ice on the road and the truck goes over and it's a total loss, God forbid, please let that never happen. You may have a harder time getting coverage because that's considered an act of God.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. With this package, you're fully covered.
Wow.
Right. And then it even has some other things. You get a 1 year of identity theft protection included in it, which is there. You get
Who is this through? It's through.
it's through Unigroup Mayflower.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
It's incredible. You get identity theft protection for a year. If you think about what's that company? I forgot the name of it. The identity protection company, LifeLock.
Oh yeah.
If you want to get LifeLock, it's $25 a month.
Yeah. This is included.
This is included. Okay. Very good. So you get that. You get identity theft protection. You also get what they call claims assist. I call it claims concierge. You get someone
Which is very important because I know people who've gone through that claims process and they get left out to dry. Not a lawyer or
Right.
Mayflower, but in the past, just people have told me.
correct.
They issue a claim and they get like left on hold.
Correct. So this claims assist is like your own personal claims concierge person that will walk you through every part of it, including coming down to the house to fill out the claim form for you.
Wow. Really?
Mhm.
That's incredible.
Yep, it's great.
And again, it's just the common adage, you get what you pay for. And if you have it in your budget to pay that extra $200, which really is not a lot of money,
It's not a lot of money.
you're gonna get so much for that value. And that's the important thing to look at, is what is the value of what I'm paying for this move? Is it going to make my life easier throughout this process? Is it going to reduce my stress? Am I working with somebody who I trust? And even though I probably just met this person or they referred to me, which helps a lot, are they going to make sure I'm taken care of?
Right.
And that's, I think, something that we do between both Molloy and Sorensen incredibly well. And then on top of that, the Mayflower and Unigroup system is simply the best in the world. It's not even,
There's no
an
doubt.
argument.
And as I said, if you, to your point, people's homes are the most important thing to them.
100%. And all of their assets.
It's all their personal items, their cherished memories, their photos, their everything is going into a truck in our care. Think about that. Think about everything you own is going to be in my care.
And it starts with you, because it's not just the truck, it's the movers, it's the drivers, it's all of the people in between. And that's where having a trusted, either referred or vetted move consultant who's been doing it for 8 years now,
Correct.
To trust, and obviously I know you, there's not a better guy to trust. So that's why it's just so imperative to do that process. Getting back to the scams, I have to tell a story, and I hope we can clip this because this will be good for social media. But my sister moved 1-bedroom apartment rental. She was probably 25 at the time, and I was in the industry. And she's like, Jack, how can I do this move as cheap as possible? And I really didn't know any better at this point. I was like, if you want to do it as cheap as possible, I was like, just go on Craigslist and find somebody to do it there. And she did. And this is why the acts of God and mechanical, when you said mechanical issues, or what was it again? Mechanical breakdown. I thought you meant on the truck. And what had happened is these guys came, loaded all of her stuff. I was there. And I saw them do everything. It was fine, whatever. I go to her new apartment to meet them there, and they're not showing up. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? They're not answering the phone, all this jazz. My sister gets a call. They had broken down, like an axle broke or something like that, or they got a flat, something along those lines. They don't get there for another like 2 hours. And at this point, I had gone back to where they crashed or got in the accident to meet them there. But they had gotten to my sister's. So they get to my sister's there. And they're like, well, we want you to pay for the lost hours there. My sister's like, I'm not doing that. I know. And they take out all of her stuff, ask for more money. They say no, and they leave. And my sister is not exactly the most calm person. So she loses it, gets all upset. I go there, all of her stuff, 5-story walk up. I go into Big Brother mode, and I lug it all up 5 floors. So I told her after that, I was like, from now on, we're not doing this cheap anymore. And I think everybody comes to that conclusion at some point in their life. And it would just be far better if you pay the extra. Typically on these, cheap movers, we're probably like 20, 30% more.
Well, if it's 20 or 30% more, that, there is certainly a swing in the industry for that, and we're not too much more than that.
Right.
A legitimate mover.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Because there are some, I would say tier 2 movers that may be legitimate, but just may not be that good.
Right. Right.
So I'm gonna one up your story for a minute.
Yeah, go ahead.
And this is probably one of the saddest stories I've had in our industry. It was last summer. It was Friday at about 4:30 in the afternoon. It was probably mid-July. It was a rainy, cold, not typical weather Friday afternoon for the summer. I got a call from a woman who's in real distress, and she's crying, and she says, "You got to help me." I said, "What happened?" She said, "The movers came to my house. They brought everything that I own, put it on my front lawn, demanded more money, and then and weren't going to finish this job until they got more money. They left. My stuff is sitting on the front lawn. What can I do?"
In the rain.
In the rain. in the rain. And, unfortunately, at that point in time, I called every friend in the industry that I have to try to see what we can do. But, at Friday at 5, 6 o'clock in the summer, these guys are either still working or they're exhausted because they've worked like crazy.
Especially in July.
So her stuff sat there, and this is her prized possession. This is her family. This is her
Poor thing.
her pictures, her albums, everything that she ever owned is sitting on her front lawn in Nassau County, in the rain. You want to just melt.
Right.
And turns out I ended up looking up our name, and sure enough, we did give them an estimate at one point, and they went with the cheaper guy.
Yep.
And
there's not much you can do at that point. Obviously, you want to get a crew there or something like that, but it's it's tough to just pull that out of thin air when crews are scheduled and on jobs and in the middle of it, especially again, that's peak season. So it's very difficult. It's like going to the airport, and trying to catch a flight on Christmas.
Yep.
So it's very difficult. That's very sad to hear. And that's, again, when I was doing residential moving, I told people, I was like, listen, it might be more expensive. There might be a lot of variables at play there, but there's going to be very few people who care more about making sure this move goes well. That's all I care about doing.
And by the way, Jack, we're not talking a lot more expensive either.
No.
And the other thing is, people are selling their homes. They're walking away selling their homes for $3, $4, $5 million. And then they're going to want to hire the cheap mover. It doesn't make sense.
Well, it's the misconception of moving. And we talk about it all the time on this podcast, is just the sense that there's no craft to it. It's just, I need guys to pick my stuff up and get it from one place to another. But there's far more than that. And again, people don't realize that until it's too late.
Moving is, someone told me this once, and I really believe it. Just as you have, electricians, plumbers.
Of course.
This is a trade.
Of course.
Moving is a trade. And honestly, it is the hardest work someone could ever do. Think about it. You mentioned your sister's place. Walking up 5 flights of stairs in 95-degree weather with the humidity. These guys are working hard like you would not believe. And I'll ask the consumers, whoever's listening to this, make sure you give these guys water, offer them water. People have asked unfortunately, you see the best and worst in people.
Mm-hmm.
You hear stories where they won't even offer them a glass of water.
Especially during the summer.
Offer them a glass of water. Tip them,
Right.
Just as you're going to we're in a world now where everything is tips. You go to Burger King and you're going to hit the,
turn that damn thing around wherever you go, anywhere.
Tip your drivers, right? Tip your crews, rather. These guys work hard. They're the hardest working people in the world.
And nowadays, too, just so we're clear on this, because I get this question sometimes, it's usually 20% of the total move cost, right?
You know what? I tell people an average tip today is about $75 per man per day.
Okay.
So I don't know about the percentage because it really depends on so many different factors. But I think that's a good number.
Yeah.
I always tell people, and someone did this to me a long time ago, and I think it's the greatest thing ever. The consumer, when you get there, when the crews get there, you give them something. Give them.
Right.
And say, hey,
I told people that too.
Say to the crew, hey, listen, guys,
have something waiting for them.
Yeah.
Either whether it's breakfast, donuts, whatever, Gatorades.
Yeah.
Get off to that good start is huge. You
give them half the tip, and then tell them, hey, when you're done, you get the other half.
Right. Exactly.
You have no idea how hard this guy's going to work for you.
Really, you're absolutely right. And it's the small gestures, and again, that's the thing. It's the small attention to detail. It's the small things that we do to go above and beyond in order to make sure that these clients are properly serviced through this process. Because again, it can turn what should be 2-week process at the most for an interstate move, give or take, into a far longer process if you need to go through just a horrible claims process and all of those things, or even if you don't go through the claims process and then you have to find other ways to find new furniture it's the worst. It's the worst. I wanted to talk about too, to switch gears a little bit, as far as corporate moving. And what we're trying to build and the power that we possess now with our acquisition of Sorensen, between, it's called the Eastern Corridor, New York, even up to Boston and Maine, but from New York to Florida, there's a lot of potential there to relocate employees and things like
So
that.
let's talk about that. And I tell every one of our advanced people that behind every office move and every commercial move, there is a residence behind there and an employee that has to move.
Mhm.
We are being part of Unigroup, and once again, United, Mayflower, the whole system. We are the most powerful mover in the United States. When I say powerful, meaning we have more trucks than any other moving company, probably by a factor of 3. And I'm just pulling that out, so I don't know if that's a real number, but let's just say it's a factor of 3. So if we're working with a company, we can come up with an employee relocation package to help not only their company move, but help their employees move. Whether it's, and some companies give what we call a lump sum, where they tell every employee, here, you have $10,000 to do the move, and or we can work with an RMC to get them to sell their house, get them to do a complete relocation.
What's an RMC?
I'm sorry, relocation management company. So what happens is corporations will hire an RMC to not only do the moving part, but to sometimes buy the home from the employee, sell the home, a full relocation package, including finding the right neighborhood in the new place for the employee to relocate, schools, you name it.
Yep, grocery shopping, all that stuff, entertainment. Yeah,
Correct.
and that's a real nice service that you can offer. When I was at Indeed, I tried to take that over for our employees, just because my job had become a little too not simple, but automated, if you will.
Yep.
And I had gone to HR and said, I come from a residential moving background. I'd love to take that over for employees, and didn't get very far. But I know what it's like internally at a company to have to manage that process. And typically it is falling under HR and that division.
Correct.
And if you can create a really full concierge-like process to get through that, it makes the employee experience. We were talking about before, as far as like tipping your drivers or your movers up front. If you can set your employees up before they even get to this new destination, they're going to work that much harder at their job.
Right.
If you do it right. If you don't, and you leave it up to them, you give them that stipend, that $10,000, you have no idea. It's out of your control now. You just gave your employee $10,000 and said, good luck with this. That's a risky move.
And the employee, going back to the scams, is going to say,
what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, I
want to save as much money as we can with this.
I'm going to put $2,000. I'm going to pay the mover $2,000. I'm going to put $8,000 in my pocket and make some money out.
And not only that, but a lot of times those stipends come with, like, that also includes airfare, that includes hotels while you're waiting for your moving stuff to arrive. It includes all of those things. So then they have to budget it all out. And frankly, a lot of times it's not $10,000, it's like $5,000.
Correct.
And it doesn't cover a lot of things. So that's why they end up going with the cheap mover, and it turns into a terrible experience. And you need this employee.
Correct.
Especially when they're relocating. There's been an agreement made where this employee, you believe in this employee to relocate them to a new market, and the employee believes in this company to lead them in the right direction. And by neglecting that relocation process, whether it's the home buying, renting, moving, all of the variables that go into it, you're putting a great risk at hand,
right? And
it could screw it up before it even gets started.
And one of the other things that we do, which not every moving company does, but we do, every move has a dedicated move coordinator.
Right.
Okay. So what the dedicated move coordinator does is they are with the customer every step of the way.
Mm-hmm.
They are not. They're not talking to a computer. They're talking to a real person that's available to them whenever they need anything, all the time, to make sure that their move goes smoothly. Where's my truck? When is it going to be there? I have a question about packing this. Whatever it is, what do I do about my animals? Anything that is going to happen throughout that process is handled by your move coordinator.
Right, and that is very important too. And I feel like move coordinators are very common practice in this industry, but I guess when you're talking about these second tier and smaller like moving companies, it's not common.
And here's the other thing, Jack. you could have a move coordinator, or you could have a real dedicated move coordinator.
Right.
There's a big difference.
Yeah.
And our coordinators no one can prove me otherwise. I'm telling you, we have the best trained coordinators in the industry.
Yeah.
And I'm talking Molloy and Sorensen,
Yeah.
and even Advanced.
Yeah.
Our coordinators, they know their stuff. They're experienced. They've seen everything. They know how to solve a problem.
Right.
And a move coordinator is a very special person.
I'll tell you what, you're not kidding.
You mentioned before about the stress of moving. And this is, you've heard this a million times, Jack, I'm sure, but maybe people on this podcast haven't. Death, divorce, and moving, the three most stressful things in life.
Yep.
Right? Moving is up there. Even the most normal, calm, sane people can lose their shit
Yeah.
in the move process. They get really stressed, really upset, really emotional.
Rightfully so.
Rightfully so. Our job, by the way, I'm a psychology major, and our move coordinators know how to talk to them, know how to deal with them, know how to help them through this process.
Right. They're part-time therapists, or
I would say more than part-time.
Right.
It's so much. Having a calming voice on the other end of the phone really changes. It's kind of funny. Two of my move coordinators on my team are both Southern.
That's nice.
One is actually grew up in Georgia, lives in North Carolina, and the other one is from Tennessee. Right? Those two, the Southern accent to a New Yorker is somewhat calming. It's
very much more so than the Long Island accent that you get. Like, what do you want?
What do you want? Don't worry, honey, we got this. And Jack, I'm telling you, there's something to be said about that. Hats off to move coordinators, by the way.
Yeah, they do a great job.
Love them to death. I take a bullet for them. They're great.
Yeah.
And to our movers as well. I can't thank everyone enough.
It is, and that's something we've talked about many of times, and it's true. As far as the group that we have at the Advanced Group and the family of companies a part of it, it's just a great structure in place, and everybody is bought in, and it works out very well. I wanted to get back to the RMCs though.
Yep.
What does that structure look like? Because they really came in about 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
and shifted the power of corporate relocation.
Correct.
And I've never got the chance to really talk about it or analyze it with anybody, but I guess this is the best time.
Mm-hmm.
How has that, changed the way companies evaluate their relocation packages and who they work with, and how can we now capitalize on it with our acquisition of Sorensen?
So that's a kind of a goated question. There's a lot of answers. A lot of it depends on the size of the corporation,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you're a huge corporation, Fortune 500 company,
Yeah.
it's very different. The biggest consumer in movers is the U.S. government, the military,
Yeah.
which is kind of like an RMC in itself.
Right.
But the RMC, if a company has an RMC in place, the RMC is using the right type of movers.
That's what I was going to get at next. Sorry to cut you off.
Go ahead.
Would they use us?
They would absolutely use us.
Okay.
They would absolutely use us. And the contract is then with our corporate, with Unigroup, which is, once again, owns the Mayflower brand. So the contract is with Unigroup, and it was backed by Unigroup. It's with us and backed by Unigroup. So that we are held to the contract 100%. If anything were to go wrong, Unigroup is backing the whole thing. And not that anything ever goes wrong, but it's the world we live in.
Right.
So if a company has an RMC and they working directly with an RMC, then the RMC will hire a company like us. That's one way to do it. The other way is if you're a company that's looking for a moving company, and let's say you come to me and you're Jack Macejka Incorporated and you have 50 moves, and you come to me and say, "Hey, Stephen, how do I do the move?" And then I may say, "Hey, Jack, listen, we could do the move ourselves, one by one, or we could set you up with a contract, a national account. And if you'd like, I can introduce you to an RMC who can be part of this whole thing and can offer some additional services."
Why don't we create our own RMC?
Some agents have RMCs. It's something that it could be in the future.
I mean, all you're really getting at is the mover, which we are.
Yep.
And then you need like a broker in these different markets, whether you're working with a national chain or local,
It's funny you should say that. We actually have another program. Through Mayflower, we have a program where we can find a broker in any market for homes, a reputable real estate broker to find you a home, and you get cash back.
Right.
So if you were to come to me and are interested in moving, and you're going to Nashville, Tennessee, I don't know why I just came up with that because I just got back from Nashville.
It was a nice place.
Great place.
Yeah.
And are looking for a realtor and don't know anyone there, I can hook you up with a realtor, and you get, and I forgot the percentage off the top of my head, but it's a significant amount of money, a percentage back on the cost of the home that you get back in your pocket as cash.
Yeah. See, so you're saving money there.
So yeah, so I mean, we you know what I mean, we could act as the RMC, but and I think that could be in the cards in the future. At this point, we got big fish to fry. So
that's right. Yeah.
and I mean, exciting times.
As a consultant, and that's the way I view myself.
As do I.
Right. Exactly. A relocation consultant.
Yep.
You always look for as many resources for your client as possible. So like that's just one more. That's good to know.
Mm-hmm.
I've been so focused on just growing like the office moving, in the environment that we're in right now isn't exactly, pro like moving a lot right now.
Yep.
I mean, people are just more stationary than they've been in a long time.
Right.
So I've just been, focused on putting my head down and finding these opportunities in commercial office work. But with that being said, I would love to do the corporate stuff. That's like
I would love you to do that.
Yeah, no, you would. So that's something down the road that I'd love to get back into and do that for companies, because again, what it allows me to do is just help more people, and not me, us to do. It allows us to help more people and, make sure they're taken care of, and all of the great things that you mentioned today become available to them through their move process. And the thing about the move, and this, every move is different. Even if it is a 1-bedroom apartment, the people are different, the assets that are moving are different. So it needs to be handled with care as an individual.
Correct. And accountability. And one of the things about what you're talking about is, on a national account, we're accountable to the company, to the RMC. We can't mess up.
Right.
We're not allowed to.
Right.
We have to have the best crews,
Mm-hmm.
the best labor, the best timing for delivery. Everything has to be perfect. If we're not perfect, guess what? One and done, baby.
Yep,
That's it.
That's it. It's a short leash in this industry.
Yep.
That's why I like it too, because you just got to step up and get it done. And, once you do, you're on top of the hill.
Yep. You talked about resources, right? One of the things that we are pretty obsessed with is helping a consumer with all necessary resources.
Right.
Everyone's needs are very different, right? Some consumers want a full pack. They want us to pack everything. Some consumers want us to hang their TVs on the wall, right? Some consumers want us to take away the empty box.
Right. All sorts of stuff.
You name it. We will, if we don't have the resources in-house, we will get the resources for what they need.
And important to know, we usually have these resources closely associated with us. If it's not in-house, that's the thing. It's not like we're searching Google for these people.
No.
Yeah,
we have them in our back pocket. And I mean, a perfect example is wine, right? People are very into their wine collections. I have the best, and I vetted them myself, and I've used them a million times, the best wine mover in the country, meaning they're through us. But I could store wine,
Mm-hmm.
I could pack wine, I could move wine. Now, my movers are the best movers in the industry. I don't want them to pack wine,
No.
Pack a $600.
Especially on Long Island too. A lot of people have that, and yeah, it can be inventoried and all of those things. Yeah.
And it's got to be handled right. It's got to be stored right. I have wine people, right? Pianos. I mean, we move most pianos ourselves. But if you have a first edition Steinway, parlor grand piano, we may want to use a specific piano.
Of course, and that's for you to assess.
Correct.
And give that advice as a consultant.
Correct.
So yeah, it's all very important and very good. But Stephen, I'm going to tell you, today is what? Today is May 15th, 2023. Within 3 years' time, That's a long time too. I'm giving myself a long leash. We'll have a national relocation account. I'm saying it right now on the podcast.
Hopefully many.
Yeah, hopefully many by that. At least one, no, I'm telling you now.
All right, Jack, we're on it. Let's bring it. We'll do it together.
All right, that's right. We will
do it together.
Thank you for coming on today. This was great. Very informative, very fun. Good stuff. Looking forward to the next time, all right?
Excellent.
Once we get that first national account, that's when we'll come on again. We'll talk about it, all right?
I have to wait that long?
No, it's not going to be that long. It'll be sooner. I'm going to say 2 years, 2025. I like all the fives in a line there.
Fair enough.
Works out well.
You got it.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Looking forward to the next time.
Thank you. How'd I do?
Beautiful. Beautiful. That was